Hi everybody, my name's Joe Rolland. I'm going to be co-hosting today's event along with my fellow activist Chris Peace. This is the first time we've ever done a virtual rally for obvious reasons. So if we've got any IT problems or difficulties, please bear with us, but we've practiced thoroughly, so everything should be fine. The theme for today is United and Strong, and we're going to be hearing from campaign groups from right across the spectrum of working class people who have suffered injustices. So I think it's something you're really going to enjoy. And for the first time ever as well, we've got British Sign Language interpreters here with us so that everyone can take part into today's rally. So enjoy the day. If you're going to be posting stuff on social media, please use the hashtag Orgreave Justice. And to get us started, we've produced a video of all the previous rallies and demonstrations that we've held. So we'll watch that and then get right into the speakers. Cheers.
Orgreave was the pinnacle of the violence by the police that were meted out in our communities during the miners' strike. The police and the state tried to send a message to our communities that their fight for their jobs wasn't to be tolerated, and they tried to beat us back to work. We're here today to make sure Amber Rudd and the government know that we won't be silenced, we won't shut up, and when they did that disgraceful decision and said there was no public inquiry in October, we're going to fight to the very death to make sure we get one.
Hey! This is our banner here, the Blenheim Supporters banner. We don't just fight for us. Us who was attacked by big construction companies and the police. On our banner, we've got the Shrewsbury pickets, we've got Orgreave, and we've got Hillsborough. Because this isn't one struggle, it's a struggle for all working people, and we're all in it together.
There can be no doubt that women movement against pit closures was the backbone of that historic strike, 84-85.
I'm just going to read a message of support out from Australia to show you how much international support we've got. It's from the Maritime Union. It says, for many of us on the left, the struggle of the British miners' strike in 1984-85 was a defining moment in our lives. To see the unmasked power of the state unleashed against British miners was a lesson in the corrupt and brutal nature of the state. It was also a lesson of courage. In the face of great adversity, the miners and their families and communities showed that one union can stand together, and it's one union around the world.
The Orgreave campaign was promised a full public inquiry, and the Labour Party will not rest until you get one.
It is not in the public interest to hold an Orgreave inquiry. The Chief Constable of South Yorkshire wants an inquiry. The South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner and other PCCs want an inquiry. Even Peter Bottomley, Conservative Under Secretary of State for Employment in the 84 Thatcher government, has said there should be an inquiry.
Over the last 5 years, since the first release of the Cabinet Papers, it has become undeniable that the strike was politically motivated, that the start of the strike was determined by the coal board in collusion with the then Tory government. That's why the Tory government are determined to resist any calls to hold a public inquiry into Orgreave.
Why do you think the papers are locked away till 2066? They're hoping we'll not be around. Well, I've got news for them. I've started a healthy eating campaign.
By refusing to conduct an inquiry, this government is showing us that we up here just don't matter, past, present or future. I represent an old mining village, Bayton. Village and towns like Bayton are still suffering because of the loss of the pits and what happened here 35 years ago. And it's these same villages and towns that are savage today under Tory austerity. Orgreave was symbolic of the Tory orchestrated breakup of the unions and the anti-trade union legislation that followed.
We're fighting against the scandal that's universal credit. We're fighting against racism and discrimination in our communities, and never forgetting the role our brothers and sisters played during the strike. The beggars, they kept us safe. They were there for us and we'll be there for them. No peace until we get justice for Hillsborough. No peace until we get justice for Grenfell.
The fact that 72 people can die in their own homes, in the richest borough, in the richest city, in one of the richest countries in the world, is an utter horror.
The next Labour government will launch an independent inquiry into the brutal clashes during the strike in '84, not least at Orgreave, where so many questions still need to be answered. And I thank every one of you at Orgreave today who have not given up in the fight for justice.
We are women, we are strong, we are fighting for our lives, side by side with our men who work the nation's times. United by the struggle, united by the past standards. Here we go, for the women of the working class. And it's here we go, for the women of the working class. We are not defeated.
Well, we really hope that's brought back some memories to you of our previous rallies. I'm delighted now to move on to introduce our very first speaker. It wouldn't be an Orgreave rally if we didn't have the National Union of Mine Workers represented. And I'm very pleased that we have General Secretary Chris Kitchen joining us today. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you. I would like to start by expressing my thanks to the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign for their vision to hold this year's rally virtually, as opposed to cancelling the event due to the coronavirus pandemic. Surely even the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, will get the message that if a global pandemic can't stop the campaign, then a continued refusal to hold a public inquiry won't. We all know why the Tory party don't want an inquiry, because they've got something to hide. The reality is that even if social distancing rules had been relaxed to allow the event to go ahead, a lot of former miners would not have felt safe to attend in the current climate. This is because many of them suffer from underlying health problems with their breathing, caused by the years they worked in the mines, that would put them at a greater risk of a less favourable outcome should they contract COVID-19. By holding the rally virtually, they can take part in the rally and continue to show their support to the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign in their aim to have a public inquiry into what happened at Orgreave 36 years ago. The same things that happened on the picket lines up and down the country, but on a smaller scale. Looking at the lineup of speakers for today's event, it is clear that injustice against decent, honest, working people continue to happen. I believe that as long as the establishment can continue to delay holding a review of the injustices, they will continue to happen. We cannot learn from the past and improve society for everyone if we cannot find out why injustices were allowed to happen and put in place safeguards to prevent it happening again. While I commend the hard work of the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign and other pressure groups, some represented here today, I believe we shall not get justice from a Tory government. But that does not mean we should not continue to keep up the pressure and seek it. You only need to look at what happened in respect to providing free school meals for hungry children over the summer holidays. Putting aside that it is a national disgrace that in 2020 we have children in our country who are dependent on free school meals to keep hunger at bay, the fact that it took Marcus Rashford, a professional footballer, to spearhead a public outcry against the Tory government that were adamant that they were not going to change their decision, to force them to do a U-turn, shows just how unjust our political system has become. The NUM have other campaigns for fairness for our members, former members and their families, against the unfair 50-50 split of surpluses from our pension fund, the Mine Workers Pension Scheme, through an arrangement that has seen successive governments since the industry was privatised get over £4.5 billion from a scheme that they've not put a penny into. Fairness in getting compensation for former mine workers for industrial diseases they contracted through working in the nation's mines from the DWP. The accurate recording of industrial diseases on death certificates so that the families of mine workers can access the compensation denied to the miner during life, to name but a few. I feel a huge sense of pride speaking at today's event on behalf of the National Union of Mine Workers. And looking at the other speakers and the organisations and campaign they represent, I'm hopeful that we can support each other to gain justice. One thing I have learnt from standing in the field at Orgreave 36 years ago is how important it is for us all to stand together and support each other. It is only by standing together that we can build a better, fairer future. You only need to look at the history of the mining industry in the UK to see what happens when we don't. During and after the strike, Thatcher and her supporters split the National Union of Mine Workers. The coal board put area against area, pit against pit, miner against miner. The result was the rundown and eventual demise of a once great industry, and the devastation of mining communities that the industry supported. You can see the same divide and conquer tactic being used again. It was not that long ago that they used it against NHS staff and teachers, forcing them to take industrial action and trying to turn public opinion against them. The very same people we rely on to educate our children and grandchildren. And you look after our elderly and sick. Through the coronavirus pandemic, they've been applauding along with the rest of us, our magnificent NHS staff and key workers. But how long after the pandemic will it continue? How long before they try and divide us once again? The NUM's motto is the past we inherit, the future we build. Let's work together for justice for all, no matter how much time has passed since the injustice occurred, so that we can build a better, safer and fairer future for all. Solidarity, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's event.
Thanks so much, Chris. Absolutely honoured to speak alongside you again, and it's brilliant that you're speaking from Miners Hall. I can see some banners there in the background, which we're all dearly missing today. So thank you very much. Even though we've moved the rally online this year, we've still found a way to try and get some money out of you, everyone who was watching. We'd normally be selling our T-shirts and badges and rattling our buckets, but as you can see, we've set up a PayPal account. So if you look on the screen or in the chat, you can see a way to donate to us. We can't continue this campaign without having your donations. It's a truly voluntary campaign. We're supported by the trade union movement and people like yourselves watching today. So please make that donation and help us carry on the fight for justice. And now I'm honoured again that I'm going to be able to introduce the Justice for Grenfell campaign. Again, it's another anniversary. It's 3 years since that horrific event took place almost. Last weekend actually was the anniversary. And so I'm now going to pass you over to Judy Bolton and Yvette Williams to talk about the Justice for Grenfell campaign.
Hi, thank you, Joe, and everyone who's here. My name is Judy Bolton, and I'm a campaigner for Justice for Grenfell. And I'm so truly honoured to be with you all today as we remember the atrocities at Orgreave on the 18th of June 1984. I'm inspired and I'm emboldened by the people of Orgreave on how you rebuilt your communities and strengthened your lives through a spirit of determination, indignancy, and a fight for justice. In Ladbroke Grove, North Kensington, 3 years ago, we witnessed the worst atrocity and loss of life since World War II. And 3 years on, we're still fighting for justice. Grove, as it's fondly referred to by us as locals, is a community that has a long history of class inequality, political and racial tension, from the murder of Frank Critchlow to the Notting Hill riots and the slum landlords. I've lived in Grove for the last 16 years, and it's where I call home. We're one of the most diverse communities in the country, from British, Caribbean, Portuguese, Spanish, African, Asian, Moroccan, and the list goes on. Cheek by jowl, we connect. We are family. We live, we work, we worship, we play, and raise our children together. This was so evident on the night of the fire and the days that followed. We have no support from central government, and we were on our own. What ensued still stays with me, ingrained as part of my very being, was the strength and the unity and the commitment of the community. Lost in grief and raw with pain, no one was coming, and we knew it. We did not wait on the authorities, then they should have been first on the scene. We did what Grove did best. We stepped in and we stepped up. That day, the Herculean task under the most extreme of conditions was simply to help. Grenfell was family. Lives had been lost and the survivors were displaced and a community shattered. The shops opened, giving away food and drink. The faith centres, mosques, churches also, donations of food, clothing. It just came flooding in from everywhere. Mothers carried milk, nappies, young people asking where can they help. Our homes were open to give shelter to whomever needed it. Out of the chaos, I saw beauty and humanity of these people. Grove is home of the carnival, also born out of discrimination, inequality, and racial bias that brought a community together. Out of the need came the birth of many Grenfell communities, including Justice for Grenfell, with the same simple question of how do we fill that need? 3 years on, these groups still serve the community and go from strength to strength in the fight for justice. I want to thank you so much for having me speak today. And we, the J4G campaign, stands with you in solidarity. I'd like to now introduce my strength and my colleague in the campaign, Yvette Williams. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Judy. As Judy said, we're really honoured to be part of this virtual rally today, and it's with the Orgreave Justice Movement and the many other campaigns here today that we keep our campaign going, and we thank you for your support and solidarity with us. With the recent COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen the government come into our homes every day, bamboozling us with statistics and data. Well, here are ours. In June 1984 at Orgreave, 71 pickets were beaten, arrested and charged with so-called riot for simply defending their jobs. In June 2017, 72 men, women and children lost their lives in the fire at Grenfell Tower. And 3 years later, no arrests have been made. No public inquiry was granted for what happened at Orgreave. A public inquiry was offered 3 days after the Grenfell fire by the then Prime Minister, Theresa May. The inquiry chairman has decided that institutional discrimination or social inequality should not be included in the inquiry's terms of reference. I make these comparisons because it shows how the state treats us without open procedures or transparency. The discourse of Grenfell and Orgreave are ones of both race and class. And it's really time we acknowledged a few hard truths about systemic inequality in Britain. As we can see from those attending the rally today, injustice is a continued and senseless part of our lives. Authoritarian societies always exploit those at the bottom. And we can see this with the recent handling of COVID-19 that we term as a virus of inequality. And it would be remiss of me not to have to mention the Black Lives Matter movement here too. It is those with power and privilege that make decisions that lead to injustice. Following the fire at Grenfell, the former residents were scapegoated as being responsible for it, for not agreeing to have sprinklers fitted during the refurbishment. Before the fire, some residents were threatened with eviction when they complained about safety and the repairs in their homes. And there couldn't be a more fitting symbol of inequality when we look at the flammable material, the cladding that was placed on the tower to make it look pretty for the wealthy of our borough. Today, over 23,000 households have inflammable cladding on their homes. And imagine their horror as they've had to endure lockdown under COVID and the pandemic. We all need to continue a strong and unified fight for justice and change. As Martin Luther King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you for inviting us to this rally. Giving up can never be an option. And the Justice for Grenfell campaign stands in solidarity with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy and Yvette. Your strength is our strength and your fight is our fight. We have a couple of messages that we're going to read out, and I'm very honoured to get the chance to read this one out from an absolute stalwart of our movement, an absolute hero and fighter for our class, and that is from Ian Lavery MP, and I know Ian is watching. Ian sends this message today. Now more than ever, it is vitally important that we commit to remembering events such as Orgreave and learning what these pivotal moments in our history means for the future of our movement. The scars of the miners' strike are still visible today, and the demonisation of our working class communities has become commonplace under 10 years of Tory rule. We must inspire the next generation and carry forward the messages on our trade union banners. The past we inherit, the future we build. Thank you, Ian, so much for your solidarity. Ian had a fantastic article in the Morning Star yesterday. Please read it. Well, if we'd have all been there at Orgreave, we would have been hearing the amazing sound of the PCS Samba Band, who have joined us on so many of our rallies. We miss you all terribly today, but we are so grateful that Dave and Rowena from the Samba Band have done a short video of solidarity, and we're going to watch that now.
The PCS Union Samba Band only plays on protests. We are absolutely not for corporate hire. Set up in late 2011, we have done 118 protests to date. After lockdown is over, we will be back. We have played on Orgreave Truth and Justice marches. It is always an honour to be invited to do so, and with it being locked down, there's just 2 of us out of a band of 30 today.
Hi, Orgreave Truth and Justice Campaign virtual rally. I'm Rowena, and I'm a PCS activist and also a member of the PCS Samba Band as well. I supported the miners' strike right from the start. I was a spotty-faced teenager from Stevenage who was a student at Birmingham Poly at the time. I was heavily involved in the Students' Miners Support Group and also Birmingham Trades Council's Miners Support Group. We collected money and donations for local pits and also went down to the Rhondda Valley to give solidarity and donations, where we were treated so kindly and generously despite you having so very little. It's always been an honour to play for the Orgreave Truth and Justice Campaign. My favourite ever protest was with you outside the Home Office. We ended that protest with a rousing rendition of Here We Go.
To the Orgreave Truth and Justice Campaign. No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
Oh, thanks so much to PCS Samba Band. Absolutely gutted that we can't be listening to you in real life. But I'm confident that we'll be out there on the streets campaigning again in the not too distant future, and we'll definitely be inviting the full Samba Band to take part in our next protests and rallies. Now, I've got the pleasure to introduce the Shrewsbury 24 campaign and Eileen, who's worked so hard. And there's a vicious rumour going around that she might actually have some good news to tell us for once. So I'm going to pass you straight over to Eileen. And thanks so much for being here, Eileen.
Thank you to the Orgreave Truth and Justice Campaign for inviting us to participate in this rally. It is a privilege to be here at this groundbreaking event with all the other campaigns who are fighting for truth and justice. Each year, we travel to South Yorkshire to this annual display of solidarity. United we stand. I am pleased to be able to say to you all this year that we have been victorious in finally getting the Criminal Cases Review Commission to refer the case of the Shrewsbury pickets back to the Court of Appeal. We are one step nearer to overturning this miscarriage of justice. This is a magnificent success, not just for the campaign, but for the whole trade union and labour movement. We've never to forget that. The campaign has worked solidly for the past 14 years to seek justice for the 24 building workers who faced the full force of the state in 1973. 6 pickets went to jail and 16 received suspended prison sentences. Getting justice for working people is an uphill struggle. Successive governments have refused to release documents relating to the Shrewsbury trials. They cite the Freedom of Information Act, Section 23, which says that to release any documents would be a danger to national security. What could be a possible danger to national security? A building workers' strike. We then decided to find the evidence ourselves, which took us over 10 years, with visits to archives, the length and breadth of the country. We submitted our evidence to the Criminal Cases Review Commission on the 3rd of April 2012. We sent further evidence over the following 3 years. Part of our evidence is a prosecution document which shows that the police destroyed initial witness statements that they had taken. They hid this from both the defence and the court. In 2017, the CCRC turned down the pickets applications. We were absolutely devastated. This gutted each and every one of us. Our lawyers advised us we could challenge the CCRC through a judicial review. The CCRC, they said, had got the law wrong. This was a very stressful time for us all, but we were determined not to give up. The support we received from the trade union movement and other campaigns gave us the confidence to go on. We went to court twice, in November 2018 and then at the full hearing in April 2019. Our barrister had been on his feet for an hour presenting our case when the QC stood up for the CCRC and conceded. The CCRC then agreed to withdraw its original decision and look at the Pickett's case again. We then had a terrible time of waiting for over 10 months for them to come back to us again. But we decided enough was enough, and we travelled down to Birmingham to the CCRC office to complain about the delay. And indeed, 2 days later, they released their decision. But the decision was in our favour. At last, the CCRC had agreed to refer the Pickett's case back to the Court of Appeal. We were absolutely jubilant. This is a 46-year-old case. We have to remember that. The 8 Picketts who stood firm throughout the case deserve special mention. Please go and look on our website for the names. The CCRC invited any other Picketts to apply to them. Since then, we have submitted 4 more Pickett's names, and the CCRC have accepted those names together with 2 others. No date has been set for the appeal, but details will appear on our website. I want to thank you all for your steadfast support for our campaign. We could not have done it without you. And we send greetings to all the other campaigns here today that, like us, are trying to shine a light on injustice and injustices. Keep fighting, never give up, and thank you very much.
Eileen, that's fantastic. I'll hand you over now to Joe.
Thanks so much, Eileen. Absolutely fantastic, and in it a great bit of news. And it shows you that if working people do fight, we can get justice. And if we just go away and slink into the shadows, then we'll never get justice. But your campaign's an inspiration to us all, and we're proud to have heard it. And we all know in the Orgreave campaign how many hours and late nights and weekends it must have took to get that. And you know, we just take our hats off to you, and absolutely amazing. Thanks so much. Now I've got the pleasure to introduce Sal, who's a GMB shop steward, an activist. And she's going to be speaking something about right up to the modern day, because Sal's a frontline worker in the NHS, and she's been busily working even this morning to keep us all safe. So when we moan about being locked up in our homes, it's actually Sal and her colleagues that are out there on the front line. So without further ado, over to you, Sal.
I want to say what an honour it is to talk today to you all at the Orgreave Truth and Justice Rally. Thank you for inviting me. It's a shame we can't be together this year, because together we are stronger. I want to start by saying thanks to Chris and all of the NUM, especially Chris Skidmore, who have supported my dad for the last year, an old Orgreave miner suffering from mining-related ill health, support for which we are truly grateful. I was 13 in 1984 and remember those days well. We didn't have 2 halfpennies to rub together, but we were happy because of how we all came together, supported each other and kept going in what was a difficult year. One memory which is perhaps relevant today was my eyesight failing. Everything was blurred, but I didn't want to say anything to worry Mum and Dad, but eventually got caught out at school. Mum was upset, a neighbour heard and asked what was wrong. He sorted everything to get me some glasses, including payment. But if only we knew what we knew today, we could have just gone to Barnard Castle. Dad and I wanted to go to Orgreave that day on the 18th of June, 36 years ago, but tensions were rising and Mum grounded us both and wouldn't let us. But memories of that day are vivid to all who witnessed them. Deliberate brutality endorsed by a Tory government to not just smash an industry to smithereens, but to bring the unions and hard-working men to their knees. We all know they came from all over the country, and we all know who the numberless were. I don't have to say. The brutality shown is history, but it has gone on to repeat itself since. Hillsborough wouldn't have happened if Orgreave had been investigated. The lies told by a certain newspaper after 96 people were killed are horrendous to this day. Police should never have been made to change their stories to deflect the truth. It's 36 years since Orgreave and we still wait an inquiry, still wait the justice for thousands of men whose only crime was to fight for their jobs. But no, they were humiliated, vilified and called the enemy within. Well, they weren't. Look at Grenfell, 72 people were killed because of greed. Most of those who cut corners in maintaining and left all those families and people living in a death trap were either Tory councillors or supporters. The blame was given to anyone but them, the firefighters, the residents for not getting out quick enough. If the flats had been properly maintained and without flammable cladding, 72 people would still be alive and it could happen again because the cladding is still out there. I work in the NHS. I've been there for nearly 27 years. I'm also branch secretary for GMB Sheffield Health. And here we are with the biggest pandemic since 1920 with COVID-19. This time, over 42,000 deaths. The government could have locked down sooner than the 23rd of March. They didn't because they wanted herd immunity. Herd immunity is not proven, may not even happen. But to protect capitalism, they were willing to try by listening to an unelected advisor. This, with an NHS underfunded and suffering stealth privatisation for more than 10 years, is a frightening thing. PPE out of date, they blame the trust, not their underfunding. While folks such as Richard Branson asked for a bailout because they will struggle. What about smaller businesses shut down? What about all those losing their jobs and who will pay? And who will pay to get everything up and running properly if this goes away? Because let's face it, it could be around for a long time to come, if not forever. Over 300 NHS workers and care workers have now died from COVID-19. That has got to be from the poor PPE due to cuts in funding. Every life lost to this illness, every single one is a waste of life. Boris and Hancock think they've done well. The UK has the third highest loss of life in the world, and it's shameful when I hear there's only so many today. It makes me angry because every only is a family devastated by a disease that could have been stopped had lockdown been about life than losing money. If we stick together for every injustice, every life affected by capitalism, brutality, we can stand strong and change things. We see at the moment Black Lives Matter. We all need to stand with the Black Lives Matter and white Black Lives Movement and wipe racism from the face of the earth. When we all stand together, we are stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sister, and thank you to you and all our key workers at this time. We know who the real heroes of our country are, and we will, thank you so much. I think on the chat there may have been some requests for people to answer and put in details of credit cards. This is a complete scam. Ignore it. Don't have anything to do with it. We apologise for that, but such is the nature of things, I'm afraid. But please do ignore them. Thank you. The next message I have to read out is from yet another fantastic supporter of the campaign. The people from Durham Miners Association would have been with us in Orgreave today, and indeed we would be with you in Durham in July if only we could be. But I do have a message to read out from Alan Margam, who is the Secretary of Durham Miners Association. And Alan says, on the 36th anniversary of the mass picket and the subsequent unprecedented state-sponsored violence against miners and their supporters by the police and other agents of the state at Orgreave, it is a great honour to send a message of solidarity on behalf of the Durham Miners Association to our comrades involved in the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign. We give notice once again that we will never forgive and never forget, and we will continue to campaign for an inquiry to establish the truth about the events on that infamous day. Thank you so much, Alan. As I say, we'll all desperately miss being in Durham in July. And other thing that we miss is, of course, the amazing Unite brass band, who again would have been leading the march off had we been at Orgreave in person today. However, they have done us a great video. It's kind of combining the two things. You'll hear from the fantastic band themselves, but they've put in there some much valued and loved images of when they've been in Durham. So let's have a look at it. Please don't get too teary-eyed. We will all be there very soon. But now we'll have the video from the amazing Unite brass band.
well, that were amazing. What a real shame that we can't be watching the brass bands live. And I, for one, am definitely going to be missing Durham this year. Absolutely gutted that we can't go. It's my pleasure now to introduce Lee Fowler from the Blacklisting Group. Unfortunately, Lee can't be with us today, so he's sent in a pre-recorded video. And apologies, there is a little bit of background noise on it, but you can definitely get the warm message sent by Lee. So over to Lee. Cheers, mate.
Hello, Orgreave. Let's just say it's nice to get a chance to speak at this great venue, but unfortunately not in Sheffield, on the Merseyside. My name's Lee Fowler, from the Blacklist Support Group, and our group has backed all sorts of campaigns over the years. You know, the Shrewsbury lads, Hillsborough, Orgreave, you know, Camellards, all these justice campaigns, and we're also sorry. I've left Grenfell out of that. Sorry, Moira. Yeah, I just wanted to give you a bit of an outline about the group and what the group's up to and what we do. I mean, if you're aware of the blacklist in the construction industry, well, that's been going on since 2000. Well, it's been going on since time memorial. But in 2009, there was a raid on the offices in the West Midlands, and the Information Commissioner's Office, along with the police. They raided them offices and confiscated files relating to construction workers. And it was found that there was 3,213 construction workers had been blacklisted, illegally blacklisted, by 44 major construction companies. You know, and as you see this one here, Carillion, who went bust, cost us millions, didn't he? They were one of the biggest sketches of the lot. But as I say, it cost, in all, with all legal and everything else, it cost them about £55 million with compensation payments and stuff. But like, you know, I received £30,000. I was blacklisted for 25 years. You know, that's just, and it cost me 10,000 in costs. So I didn't even get £1,000 a year for all my inconveniences and frustrations and whatever. But yeah, so this blacklisting, as I say, it's still going on today. You know, we know this is going on. It's going on in London, it's going on everywhere. But they're doing it in different ways. They're trying to be clever now. They're using agencies rather than directly blaming themselves. But yeah, this consultant association was as a company was running. It took over from the Economic League in the early 90s, I think it was. Yeah, and as I say, eventually shut down in 2009. And there was a public inquiry into it. And yeah, unfortunately, their main witness died, which was quite sad and quite convenient, I think, for the companies. But yeah, so as I say, it's a case of, I just want to turn around and say that we're offering all our support today to Orgreave, as we always do. I'm missing all of you because, as I say, we normally meet up in Durham. So we're going to be missing that one as well this year, and going to be missing, obviously, Orgreave. But I'd like to say hello to all my comrades there. You know, Joe, Bev, John, Chris, yeah. I'd just like to say hello, and I wish you all the best for today, and let's hope everything goes great.
Thank you so much, Lee, for sending us the video, and solidarity to all the lads and lasses of the Blacklisting Support Group. Our next speaker, again, it's a real honour to have with us today. And that's Jan Cunliffe. Jan is a campaigner on the joint enterprise Not Guilty by Association campaign. Please follow all of these campaigns. We'll be sharing their details. But now it's my absolute pleasure to hand you over to Jan.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk about gender. I'm going to start by explaining how I became a campaigner about joint enterprise. In 2007, both my sons, who were just age 15, were arrested and charged with murder. I spent something like 3 days in the police station listening to all the evidence that was put forward in the police station. I was on both boys' police interviews, and I heard all of the questioning that was put to them by the police. And then at the very end of it, they were actually charged with murder. Now, I'm not a detective, but during that process, it became very clear to me that neither of my 2 children had murdered anyone and that they weren't involved in any violence that evening. My youngest son gave evidence in the police station as well, that he wasn't even there at the scene, that he'd already left the street when the altercation occurred. And my other son was actually blind at the time, so he wasn't even able to tell the police at the police station what he'd seen, what he'd heard, anything at all, because obviously when you've got a disability so severe, what on earth were the police expecting him to say? So it was a huge surprise to find that both of them, out of 25 people who were pulled in that night, both of my 2 sons were, for me, it felt like they were cherry-picked to go before the court, to go to trial, and both of them to give evidence on, one didn't see it because of his disability, and the other one didn't see it because he wasn't at the scene at the time. But we went through the trial process, and it was during that time that I kept hearing the phrase joint enterprise. I couldn't understand what that meant. I kept asking questions about it, didn't get any answers, not even from the legal team. It was very confusing, but at the same time, my own interpretation of it was, a joint enterprise, a joint venture, that's all of you together, all of you party to the action, all of you are involved. And that's what that was my feeling. So I went to the library and I Googled it and I couldn't find anything. So we went through that process of the trial. And partway through I kept thinking, maybe this is so that the victim's family get some sort of, get the justice. They get to see that everyone's there, but only the person that actually delivered the fatal blow that killed the victim. And it was a single blow incident as well. So I need to put that straight. It wasn't a gang attack. The victim did sadly die because of one fatal blow, and it was to the neck. And that could have only been done by one person. So I went through the whole trial process thinking this was about the victim's family finding out exactly who did what. So when we got to the end of the trial and my blind son, who, the foreman of the jury stood up and said guilty, it was an absolute shock. Even the judge looked at the jury as if to say, what are you doing? Even the prosecutor looked at me, and I kind of got the feeling that, you shouldn't have put us in this position if you didn't expect a guilty verdict. So I came away from that trial absolutely devastated, and without the actual knowledge that we can give life sentences to children as well. So my son got a life sentence for murder, even though the trial process proved that he hadn't murdered anyone. And he was a child. So when we say 12 years, that was just a minimum. So he's actually serving 99 years. So when he gets released at the end of his minimum term, he will be monitored for the rest of his life. So that was another thing that I didn't know about. I didn't know about joint enterprise. I didn't know we give children life sentences. And I certainly didn't know that we give children that haven't murdered anyone a life sentence for murder. So that's when I met a lady called Gloria Morrison, who's supporting her son's best friend, shall I say, who also was convicted of a joint enterprise murder, even though he was unconscious on the floor at the time when somebody was fatally stabbed. So we decided we needed a national campaign, and that's when GEMGA started. And we've had a few victories. We managed to get a case to the Supreme Court in 2016, and the most senior judges in the country acknowledged that they've been interpreting and misapplying the law for 32 years. And it's quite telling that the time when they first misapplied the law was back in 1984. That kind of fits with the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, doesn't it? So I think we're all really connected, by injustice. And maybe some of the people that were arrested at the time that was when the law first started to go wrong. And I think if the law had gone wrong the year before, I think all of the miners would have been arrested and charged with joint enterprise, and they'd have used foresight, and they'd have all gone to prison. So, but maybe that's why they brought in the law at that time and used it in the way that they did, so that if miners ever did go on strike again, that's when they could use it. But our fight has got, even though we had that victory in 2016, it was a victory, but it was bittersweet, because when we've then taken cases back to the Court of Appeal, so that people who have been convicted using the incorrect law, using the wrong law, should actually get a fair trial, go back to trial if possible, or have an appeal in the very least. We took 10 cases, and this again is where we fit with other campaigns, because on the night of an appeal hearing, of the appeal hearings in London, myself and Gloria Morrison were actually looking out of the window and watching Grenfell Tower burn to the ground. And the very next day we had to go to court and to listen to the cases. We then got the verdict of all those cases, and every single one of them, and children included, had their cases. None of them had their cases were classed as unsafe, and we got that answer as well. Again, quite fitting on the day that Orgreave, on the 31st of October, were told that they weren't going to get justice as well. So I think sometimes it feels as if the powers that be are doing these things to torment us, linking us together with injustice, and linking us together further by delivering injustice a second time and a third time, usually around about on the same days as each other. We've tried to take. We went back to the Supreme Court, should I say, when the 5 senior judges in the land decided that the court had been misapplied and wrongly interpreted. We didn't realise at the time that they put a little clause in there, and it's called the substantial injustice clause. So basically, you can't go back to the Court of Appeal unless you can prove that you've suffered a substantial injustice. Now, I would say that anyone who's been convicted to life for murder that they didn't commit has suffered a substantial injustice. However, we don't understand what that substantial injustice means, because the Supreme Court won't explain it to us, and we get the feeling that the Supreme Court don't know what that means either. So we've basically taken it to the highest court in the land, and they've said, no, you can't have any justice. We support over 1,000 people at the moment, all in prison. Pretty much most of them are victims of the wrong law, and a huge percentage of those people that we support are young people, young black people, working class people. People who are being deliberately targeted by the police, and therefore deliberately targeted by the CPS. We did a Justice Select Committee oral hearing once. I think it was Alison Saunders, and we put out there that we thought the law was racist, and it must be racist, because the majority of our cases are black kids. It just doesn't happen. It's not a coincidence, and we can't pretend it is a coincidence. It's a racist law, and it's a lazy law, and it's brutal, absolutely brutal. Well, Alison Saunders, who was the chief Crown prosecutor at the time, when we put to her that this was a racist law, she said that she couldn't even that in the paperwork before her, she couldn't tell what race someone was, whether they were black or not, or whether they were Asian, and I found that really who come to us, we know beforehand whether they're an ethnic minority, because they don't have your natural normal English name, like they're not Jones or Smith, and for them to actually sit there and say that they can't see in a name whether that could possibly be someone from an ethnic minority, it just stinks of the blatant lies and the blatant corruption, and how they don't care. They really don't care. They can sit in the House of Commons and they can still lie. They can sit in the Supreme Court and they can say there's an injustice, and then they can put a deliberate clause in there so that we cannot get justice. So the corruption is from the highest, and we're supposed to have a justice system that's the envy of the world. If ours is the envy of the world, then God help everybody else, because Ours is a terrible justice system. And if you think about joint enterprise, it's used in other countries. It's used in the Commonwealth. So when we give life sentences to people in this country, they go to prison. Now, if you go to some of the Commonwealth countries where they still have a death penalty, they are put to death. So joint enterprise, as it is here right now, which is a lazy law, which doesn't need huge amount of evidence, you can be convicted on just the mere possibility of foresight that a crime may happen, not the actual knowledge of a crime that is going to happen, but the foresight, the possible foresight that it may happen. Now, when that is the only evidence that you need to put someone in prison or to give them a death penalty if you live in the Commonwealth, then that is probably the greatest injustice, the worst law that we have at the moment in this country. And it expands across the world, and it has to be put right. I'm going to say thank you very much right now, and it's really important that we do stay together, because we are stronger together, and it's solidarity from Jenga.
Thanks so much, Jan. That were absolutely amazing, and I'm sure people will be flabbergasted to hear what you've had to say. So as we said earlier, all the links to the campaigns will be in the chat. So please support all the campaigns, because as Jan rightly said, we are stronger together. We're also aware that someone's been posting stuff in our chat and in one of the Facebook groups asking for credit card details. Please don't share your credit card details. We're a brazen campaign, but we've never asked you to give us your credit card details. If you want to give us money, please log on to the website and pay safely through the PayPal account. So yeah, apologies for that. The next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to hear a pre-recorded video from our comrade Joe Solo, who's hosting a gig tonight, but I'll not tell you about it. I'll pass you over to Joe, and Joe can tell you about it himself.
Hi, I'm Joe Solo, and my part in the virtual Orgreave rally is going to be in the Facebook group Joe Solo Live from the Shed tonight at 8 o'clock sharp, because in there I'm going to be performing my Miners' Strike album Never Be Defeated, which tells the stories of the men and women of the community around Hatfield, Maine back in the day. Be great to have your company, and I shall form the night leg of this here rally. And sing you some tunes. So if you fancy yet another lockdown night in, you know where to find me. Joe Solo, live from the Shed group. Join it, and I'll see you 8 o'clock sharp. Solidarity, comrades.
Awesome, Joe. I'm sure loads of people are going to be logging in tonight at 8 o'clock to take part in that gig. We've had plenty of gigs over the years, and Joe Solo's a mainstay, so I'm sure you'll all love that. And you can have a beer from the comfort of your own settee while you're watching him. Now is a massive pleasure I've been given, because I get to read out a statement from one of my childhood heroes, which is Ken Loach. If you haven't watched the film Kes, make sure you put that on your list to do as well while you're under lockdown. And here's Ken's message. Once more, we remember the brutal attack on unarmed miners at Orgreave, sanctioned by Margaret Thatcher, showing the power of the state being used against the organised working class. It reminds us, if we needed to be reminded, that the instrument of the state are there to protect the interests of those with power and privilege. We needed in 1984, and we need now, political leaders who understand that reality and who pursue the interests of the ordinary working class people. Here's a quote from Nye Bevan. The first function of a political leader is advocacy. It is he or she who must articulate the wants and frustrations and the aspirations of the masses. Well, if that's a job for the Labour leader, we're in a difficult position. The current Labour leadership of the Labour Party is in danger of falling back into the old position of making no serious demands for change. This present health crisis has been revealing, hasn't it? The government has starved the NHS of funds, outsourced our services and care workers, and put them on 0 hours contracts. We knew it was in a state of collapse before this virus even struck. Labour should be calling loudly and clearly for an end to privatisation. All employees should have union contracts, and a national care service should be set up and properly funded. What do we get? Simply an attack on Johnson's incompetence. and a bunch certainly are incompetent. But what is the principal set of demands? People are desperate for big ideas that will bring real social change for all. Why isn't Keir Starmer leading this and putting his team forward with a simple, clear language? We have begun a programme of change that the Corbyn and McDonnell leadership had made a start, and we know what would have happened. The right-wing media came for us and made certain that they were removed. Here's a challenge for the new leadership in the title of the old song. Which side are you on? Are you in the interests of the miners who were attacked at Orgreave and the state who beat those miners, or are you and is it the miners that must articulate a programme of that change? And that means now the circumstances of today. If you're with the establishment, then you will simply criticise the poor performance, but stay clear of any challenge to big power or of big business with its privatising anti-agenda ethos. That's the clear choice, Keir. Which side are you on? Solidarity with the miners and all their families who fought for their communities and their jobs. Solidarity with all those today who do such heroic work in the NHS and essential services. And solidarity with those who tear down the statues of slave traders and imperialists. Solidarity with this campaign. And that's from Ken Loach, as impassioned as ever, as you can hear by his words. What a fantastic guy he is, and a privilege to read that speech out. Now, I've got another privilege. I seem to be full of privileges today, and I'm going to hand you over to my colleague and mate, Sheila Coleman, who's going to talk about the Hillsborough Truth and Justice campaign.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks to the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Hillsborough Justice campaign. I'm always privileged to talk on behalf of my comrades in that, and I'm also very privileged to be following Ken Loach, and hopefully in the same vein as Ken's comments. I'm talking today 31 years after Hillsborough, and still and effectively gagged because of a Attorney General ruling stopping us from discussing the contents of what happened at Hillsborough due to ongoing legal cases. For us, I think it's an important point to make that when the legal process began after the Hillsborough Independent Panel report, it effectively gagged our campaign, and the campaign effectively has been silenced by the legal process, something you might all want to think about. To date, in spite of an unlawful killing verdict in 96 cases, overturning the previously accidental death verdicts of those who died at Hillsborough, there has only been one conviction, and that is on a health and safety issue where the individual, who was a former Sheffield Wednesday employee, was fined at 1980s prices of just in excess of £1,000. That is the sum total of accountability for Hillsborough to date, on top of the unlawful killings. We saw David Duckenfield, the Chief Constable, on the day, and the man considered responsible by many, found not guilty. I can't underestimate or overestimate the effect the legal process has had on the bereaved and survivors who are re-traumatized by such decisions and such blatant prejudice within courts and one-sided rulings as well. So it's been very difficult, and at times it's hard to be positive, but we have to be positive, and we have to remember that what we push for, and in 2012, when we had the Hillsborough Independent Report findings that there were lies, there were cover-up, and there was conspiracy, this enabled the good people around Orgreave to mount their campaign again. And it's a great example of how we have to work together and work in solidarity and with camaraderie in order to enable us to move forward. It's easy to be negative, but we have to remember that we overturned 96 accidental death verdicts. At one time, that would have seemed like an impossibility to us. But where we are now, we wouldn't be. But all of us here today, but for the grassroots campaigns, some of us are at earlier stages than others. But if it wasn't for those people most affected, carrying on fighting for what they knew to be right and just, there wouldn't be any of this. There would be no pushback whatsoever. And I think it's important that whilst we talk about our campaigns, Hillsborough, Orgreave, etc., I think what's important is that there are times in the trajectory where we might have to move away from our individual campaign. And so today, for example, we have as major issues the issue of obviously Black Lives Matter. And I think what is so important is that we realise that what happened to George Floyd in America and has sparked off the recent spate of marches and support and Black Lives Matters initiatives is happening and does happen still nearer to home. The way that George Floyd was murdered in America mirrors almost identically the death of a young man in Liverpool only the other year, Mzee Mohammed, who was killed similarly. A young man with mental health problems. How often have you heard that before in deaths in police custody? And yet there have been no prosecutions arising around how Mzee was killed. He was killed whilst in the custody of police. And so what I'm saying is it happens much nearer home. It's why it's important to support as well is because those people on Black Lives Matters are being punished. Only in Derry and Belfast the other week, the police, the PSNI, were arresting and fining Black Lives Matters protesters who were socially distancing on the protests, but are being fined. So we are being criminalised for supporting issues that are so pertinent to us all. Ken Loach has mentioned and referred to Keir Starmer, saying, which side are you on? Very, very true. I know what side I'm on. Here in Liverpool, we have good, solid socialist activists who supported over several years a campaign for Jeremy Corbyn to be elected into office, now suspended against allegations of anti-Semitism. Well, I can say I personally know those four people, and I would put my life on them. I would stand there, and I will stand there, and I will stand out. And the message is, even to those of us within organisations, within political parties, do not stand silently by while your comrades are being suffered and negatively labelled when all they have ever done is fight for equality, whether that be anti-apartheid or anything else. It's so important to support one another. And I think the important message is that in leading and the way forward, it is so important that we are led by those at the cutting edge of it all. We cannot take control. We can only assist. So it's so important that political parties, trade unions especially, get behind Black Lives Matters and those Black communities out on the streets supporting issues around equality, and also, more pertinently, people dying because of the colour of their skin. But we have to be led by them. We can assist, we can enable, we can assist in so many ways, resources, etc., but we cannot lead. We have to be led by the communities affected. Grenfell, another example. Probably, if we don't keep making a noise, it will be the biggest cover-up, because the enormity of Grenfell is even bigger than Hillsborough. Just think today, if Jeremy Corbyn had been elected in December, this rally today, whether virtual or in person in Yorkshire, imagine what a celebration it would have been, because we would be celebrating an ongoing inquiry, or a sure to be ongoing inquiry. We have taken a major setback, but we have to look at where positives have come. And I point to Eileen and the Shrewsbury campaign, because here is a good news story. And sometimes we've got to piggyback on those good news stories for our own morale and our own strength to carry on. I carry on and have derived great strength from other people. So what I would say is, let's remember that sometimes we diversify from our own campaign to the one that's pertinent at the moment. But we will never forget, and it is only by standing together and supporting one another and showing unity that we scare the life out of the state, and that is the way we will get justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And you're right, the collectiveness and the power and the strength of all of these campaigns together should hopefully give us that hope and inspiration. The fight is ongoing, comrades, and let's keep it that way. On the screen, we've got details of our Orgreave website. Have a look on there, make it the first thing you do after you come off this rally, and see the other ways that you can get involved in our campaign, as well as looking on the websites of all the others as well. Now I get to introduce our penultimate speaker. Again, another honour to be joined today by Janet Alder. Janet has been campaigning for decades for justice for her brother, Christopher Alder, who was unlawfully killed in police custody. Janet, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to Orgreave Justice Campaign for inviting me to speak today. And I stand in solidarity with you. I stand in solidarity with the Shrewsbury 24, with Grenfell, do you know, and any other campaign, Hillsborough, do you know what I mean? We're all in this together. Now, the climate at the moment might be racism, that's, you know, people are on the street protesting, some putting their lives at risk, yeah, for the sake of others. But this is a black and white thing together. Do you know what I mean? I think what happened there, the government was absolutely shocked that everybody came out in unity, because what we saw, you know, on our TV screens, what happened to George Floyd was absolutely inhumane and absolutely horrific. But don't think that couldn't have been one of us. It could have been any of us, because it was same thing happened to my brother Christopher. I've always worried a little bit, do you know, to how people would see this, do you know what I mean? But you can't see it any other way than just, we have all at this present moment in time got the government in the palms of our hands, and we must all get together, united with all our campaigns, and stand by Black Lives Matter. Christopher's case, do you know what I mean, was that, you know, another horrific case, but that is just one of 1,700 people in this country, both black and white, predominantly black, but black and white, that are dying at the hands of the police. Now, when I first saw met up with the Orgreaves campaign, when I first saw the actual video of the police charging them down the street, I was absolutely shocked. But we saw the self-same thing on the London streets just last week. So this shows that this can happen to absolutely any one of us whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? We have to unite, we have to fight, do you know what I mean? And we have to bring eventually all these cases together, because at this moment we are at a strength. The whole lot of us are at a strength. Even though the cases are individual, we must bring them together and we must fight this. Now, in 1998, my brother was murdered by the police. It took me all my time to actually put that on CCTV footage. But because the ordinary people in this country, basically, you know, the majority of them are not racist, they reacted, you know, based on humanity, based on how they felt, based on empathy, able to put themselves in that same position. And this is when I met up with Orgreaves and, do you know what I mean, Hillsborough campaign, and, you know, many other campaigns through the country that I've sat on panels and spoke with, should I say. Now, I believed that the state was going to do the right thing, just like Hillsborough, just like Orgreaves, Grenfell. We all believed at the beginning that the state was going to do the right thing, and we got the shock of our lives that that's not the case. The amount of brick walls that we came up against, do you know what I mean? But we've kicked many down. We've kicked many down, and we've had some achievements. So it shows that fighting and not sitting down and just accepting what happened is so, so important. Because we'd taken the police to court, the CPS stepped in. So it's not just one part of the system, the whole system is rotten, yeah? Whether it be from the CPS, do you know what I mean, the government, the whole lot of them are colluding together. The police are colluding together time and time and time and time again. Now, They think that they can just pick us off one by one, but that's not the case, yeah, because we are all in this together. Do you know what I mean? The statues being brought down the other week, yeah, of the racist slave drivers. They were ordinary people, those slave drivers. Those statues were up there looking over all of us as ordinary people, looking down on us. Yeah, they were the rich elite people of the past that did that. Ordinary people weren't the people that enslaved people. Yeah, and this has shown me the people on the street that are uniting together in this Black Lives Matter has shown me that the racism comes from the top. Night. Thank you.
Janet, thanks so much, mate. It's been a while since I've heard you speak, and as usual, you've absolutely smashed it. And as you say, we're stronger together, and we can't let anybody, whether it's in the government or the media, try and divide us, like we saw play out on the streets in London last weekend. And what a bunch of idiots they made themselves look like. Supposedly protecting statues and then having a riot down there and behaving in the most shocking manner. So yeah, we will not be divided by the right-wing press or by the government, and we stand in solidarity with you. Thanks so much, Janet. Next, another interactive bit. On the screen, you should be able to see details of how you can download our film entitled Miners' Strike Stories. We released this film in March this year on the anniversary of the miners' strike. And the reason we released that film is because, unfortunately, over the last 18 months or so, we've had a lot of our comrades pass away. And we didn't want to get them stories lost. So we've got an oral history of people's activities during the strike. And by downloading the film, you're supporting the campaign. So please download that film. Now, we're coming towards the end of the speakers, but maybe we've saved the best till last, because this is Kevin, who's been an absolute activist throughout his life. He was arrested at Orgreave, and he's a tireless campaigner for justice. So it's with my absolute pleasure I hand over to one of our best mates and fantastic campaigners, Kevin Horn.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're okay in this lockdown time. I'll tell you my story about Orgreave. When the Tories refused to have any sort of inquiry, it was because that's in 2016. It was because that lessons had been learned. The police were no longer doing the same things, but we've seen in Whitehall, obviously, police attacking peaceful demonstrators. We'd been at Orgreave a couple of times, well, a few times, like starting off with half a dozen pickets and half a dozen police or what have you, and then gradually the pickets built, and so did the police presence. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pickets. People were invited from South Wales and Kent, Durham, Scotland, and strangely enough, these people were all let in, even escorted in, and followed signposts on the M1. I think Orgreave were meant to be a moral boost, which we could have done with at that time. We'd been picketing since March. When we saw the thousands of police and the valet parking, we thought, is it time to turn back? Well, that's what I thought. I was scared stiff, man. And at a quiet time of the day, after the first run of lorries, at a quiet time of the day, when people were eating sandwiches and ice creams and playing football and cricket, suddenly the ranks of police opened and the horses came, followed by snatch squads in full riot gear. People started running away, and if they didn't run away, they just got clobbered and arrested and injured, by the way. People tried to defend themselves, as you might have seen on TV, but they all failed. On that day, there were 110 people arrested, but only 95 who were minors were charged and taken to Sheffield police station, Rotherham police station and such. Many minors had terrible injuries, as I saw in the quadrangle at Rotherham. Head wounds, especially, broken bones, arms, legs, all sorts of things. And the lads were trying to give first aid to the wounded because they had no medical attention. Now, when the solicitors arrived from London, Gareth Pearce got these people to hospital, which were a good thing, like, because some of them were at death's door. In fact, it's a miracle that nobody were killed. Meanwhile, our wives and children and partners and things were watching developments on TV and crying and extremely worried, obviously. And the film had been edited in such a fashion that it showed the miners to be the aggressors and not the police. Well, on that day, the police rioted, not the miners. And people were charged with, at the top end, were charged with riot. At the bottom end, unlawful assembly, both carrying a life sentence. So you can imagine that we had to wait to get to court. The first lot in court, first 15, waited a year. Myself, I waited 14 months and never got to court. But it was so obvious during the trial that that people were innocent, and the police had adopted or being given from somebody else statements to sign. And of course, they proved about the film being reversed, it shown in the wrong order, and they even paid out nearly £500,000 to 40 odd to 39 people. So now we're trying to accumulate papers that have been embargoed. We've got some from Kew, we've got some from Sheffield, but we can't find these. Well, we can find them. They're in Hull University Library, embargoed until 2066. What's in them? There must be something in them if they're embargoed for that long. Anyway, I better get off. But what I've got to say is we've got to continue these working class injustices and remain united and strong together as one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I think when you hear Kevin's story, it brings it all home. It's an absolute injustice that there has been no accountability for what happened that day, but we ain't going anywhere. And we are together fighting stronger because of you and everybody here today. That is basically the end of the rally. But I do get the honour to say some thank yous to people who've made this possible. And basically a massive thank you to Unite, who have helped us put this together. I don't know how we could have done it without you. And so thank you, Ryan, who has been helping us behind the scenes today. You've done an awesome job, comrade. Thank you to Real News, who made that fantastic montage that you saw at the beginning. And thanks to all these amazing, inspirational speakers for being here today. We've got lots of people who work on this campaign. You are all almighty, brilliant activists. So thank you so much for all the work that you do for nothing. We're all volunteers. And so that's brilliant as well. Musician-wise, we've had great contributions from the brass band, the samba. Do not miss Joe's solo tonight, 8 o'clock on his Facebook page. It's the first time we've had our British Sign Language interpreters with us, so thank you so much to Lynn and Anne-Marie. Thank you all so much for watching. Your messages on social media, your videos that you've sent in the last 48 hours has been incredible. Let's keep it up. Keep using that hashtag for the rest of the day. We are united and strong, and we are stronger together. Keep an eye on the campaign, and solidarity is the final word. So from all of us to all of you, we say
solidarity. See you soon.
Yay.